How did Judas die? Tell me, how did Judas die? Acts 1:18, okay. Now this man, so we're talking about Judas, purchased the field with the reward of iniquity, falling headlong. So falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and his bowels gushed out. If we go to in Matthew, okay, in Matthew 27, okay, verse 5. And he cast down the pieces of silver. So he didn't buy a field with the pieces of silver in this account in the temple, and departed, and he went and hanged himself. So either he purchased the field with that money and fell down and his intestines came out, or he threw down the pieces of silver and he hung himself. Now this is a contradiction within the Bible about the account of how Judas died.
Really? No Christian can answer. In the Gospel of Matthew, this is how Judas is said to have passed away. However, in the book of Acts, Luke records that Judas fell headlong and burst open, causing his bowels to gush out. What's the solution? Believe it or not, it's actually very simple. Matthew is telling us how Judas actually passed away, whereas Luke is telling us how Judas's body was affected by his passing. Matthew tells us that Judas hung himself. This happened on a Friday when Jesus died, just before the Sabbath. No one would have bothered to cut him down due to the religious ruling. Exodus chapter 20, 8-10 says, "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates." So the Jews wouldn't have cut him down because they had to avoid work on the Sabbath. The Jews also had ritual taboos about touching dead bodies, and it makes sense that no one would want to go near a dead body, especially the body of a traitor. Medically speaking, when rotting bodies are left alone, the internal bacteria begins to break down tissues. This causes gases to swell up from within. Pressure builds up and can actually cause the body to burst open. This is likely what happened to Judas's body. If his body was left alone for days to decompose, when somebody finally cut the rope, or if the branch snapped, the force of hitting the ground could have caused his body to burst open. The textbook of forensic and medical toxicology states, between 3 and 7 days, ever-increasing pressure of the putrefying gases associated with colliquative changes in the soft tissues may lead to softening of the abdominal parietes, resulting in bursting open of the abdomen and thorax. So to summarize, Matthew is telling us how Judas passed away, and Luke is telling us what happened to his body after his passing. And amazingly enough, it matches our modern understanding of medical descriptions pertaining to decomposing bodies. So for the people I'm responding to, thank you for actually proving the reliability of the Bible. But one last issue. What exactly did Judas do with the money? Matthew says the field was purchased by the priests, but Luke tells us that Judas acquired it. Is there a contradiction?
No!
Matthew uses a Greek word that refers to a straightforward business transaction, whereas Luke uses a Greek word which refers to acquiring something. Matthew says that the priests were the ones who bought the field, but Luke tells us that the field belonged to Judas, so therefore the priests would have bought it in Judas's name. This is seen in the Gospel of Matthew, where the priests refused to put the money back in the treasury because it came through the betrayal of innocent blood. This is why in Matthew chapter 27, the chief priest said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Haven't you guys ever wondered why it's called the field of blood? Because that's where Judas passed away. He betrayed the innocent blood of Christ, and he was so guilty he ended his own life. This is what Acts is talking about when it says that Judas acquired it. It was bought in his name, and was even named after his own passing. Ancient cultures, especially Jewish societies, had ritual purity laws against accepting money that was used for immoral purposes. It makes sense that when the priests purchased the field, they would have done it in Judas's name, and therefore Judas acquired the field. This avoided a paper transaction, showing that the priests bought something with blood money. St. Luke reported what a later writer would have seen from the legal records, whereas St. Matthew tells us what an eyewitness would say, someone who had first-hand knowledge of how the purchasing of the field went down. So yeah, no contradiction. Take care, and God bless.